Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is your captain speaking, and I would like to take this opportunity to personally welcome you to this Christmas Eve special solo flight edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. We know you have a choice when it comes to your radio listening pleasure, and would like to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. What's more, we are confident that no other radio program or venue will fly you over the friendly airwaves in as much comfort and style, nor leave you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment, quite like we can here at the Wright Flyer. Now that you're aboard, please be seated, fasten your seat belts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. We've taxied to the departure lane and are awaiting takeoff clearance from air traffic control. While they go through that mindless, bureaucratic red tape and regimentation, I'm going to go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist because there is a lot of news and information to get to before I may indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Folks, I hope that you are having a very Merry Christmas with you and your family. You know, this time of the year serves to remind us of all that we have to be thankful for. I know that I am happy to be spending time with my own family. We all wish you the very best. Despite this joyous occasion, however, those nefarious actors who place our nation and security at great jeopardy continue working towards their despicable goal. As Jeremy and I have mentioned before, the radical and extreme fringes of the left and the détente wing of the gutless opposition party continue to work tirelessly to subvert our shared United States Constitution. I'm sure many of you are wondering what it is that drives them to such fanatical devotion to a cause that literally seems to have no place in a free and open society like that of the United States. Upon a precursory glance, it can appear baffling as to how any sane individual might devote him or herself to the utter destruction of everything that is great about the United States of America. I know that I have found, and continue to find, it frustrating. No, frustrating is too light of a descriptor for this. It's infuriating. And the reason that I say this is because when you look at every corner and at every point ever since the Barack Hussein Obama regime wielded the reins of political power for the first time back in January of 2009, the détente wing of the gutless opposition party has bowed, caved, and collaborated with the Obama regime and has left we, the people, out in the cold. They have left us exposed, and they have made our country much less safe than it ought to be. This is the dark and twisted reality that we must awaken to. And, despite all of it, I do not believe that this is a time for the American people to become discouraged or to feel dissuaded from adhering to the core principles that have made this country great in the past and hold the key to sparking a renaissance right here in the United States of America. While it is true that we have faced dire times in the year 2015, a year that will go down as a year that showed political correctness for the cancerous and disastrous and even poisonous doctrine that it ultimately is, we can overcome all of the adversity that has been placed in our path. But we must maintain faith in the core principles and natural law tenets that underpin our shared United States Constitution. Our representative republic requires that we never give up faith, just as our founding fathers did not give up faith or hope during the entire scale and length of that long and drawn-out bloody war for American independence. You know, I've mentioned in several episodes now the famous Battle of Trenton, where George Washington led the Continental Army of what would become the United States of America across the ice-choked Delaware River in a surprise attack on a band of Hessian mercenaries stationed just outside the town of Trenton, New Jersey, in a time when the tide of war had literally turned against the colonial cause and the cause and movement of independence. We were able to secure a victory, thereby ensuring that the United States of America would eventually come into being, though there were many trials and hardships ahead. I like to think that what we have seen in the year 2015 marks such a pivotal turning point. We have seen the American people increasingly turn against this cancerous doctrine of political correctness that is eating away at the very soul of the United States of America. As Jeremy and I have declared war on this maniacal and twisted doctrine in the past several episodes, I am going to redouble down on this message, because it is that important. We here in the United States of America must look forward to a brighter future, to a future where our government once again strictly adheres to the fundamental principles contained within the United States Constitution, which represents the greatest birthright of any people on the face of the planet. We are the lucky beneficiaries of that great document. We are the lucky beneficiaries of the most open, honest, and free form of government ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by Providence itself. But we cannot turn a blind eye to the detractors and naysayers who are doing everything in their power to tear this great and noble system apart at the seams. When our country is in a time of great angst and uncertainty, the political powers that be have been redoubling their efforts to flood the country with so-called refugees. However, I have a feeling that there is a growing sense of concern within or among those political elites who have done everything within their power to separate and distance themselves from the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this country, we the people. They sense that the American people are tired of seeing the moral and societal decay of their once great republic, and absolutely the American people are tired of this. We are tired of seeing our people exposed to greater and senseless attacks by people like those nefarious terrorists Saeed Farouk and his twisted and maniacal wife Tashfeen Malik. We want our country to be secure. We want to be able to continue to adhere to the fundamental and unalienable rights which were endowed to us by our Creator, and we do see that this federal government is proactively and incessantly working to strip us of those fundamental and unalienable rights, irrespective of the fact that they are endowed to us by our Creator, meaning that no legitimate governmental authority has the rightful authority to strip those fundamental and unalienable rights from us. Nevertheless, potentates like Barack Hussein Obama are convinced that they know what is best for this country and that they are the only ones who can wield political power. That is hegemonic terrorism of the worst sort. And so, how do we get around this? It's important to recognize the events that have been unfurled by this regime and to see what is true and what is not true. I point to a recent dog and pony show that has been wheeled out by the Department of Homeland Security in general and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, in particular. Jay Johnson, the Director of Homeland Security, has supposedly been in the works designing a deportation program to deport some of the vast waves of illegal aliens that have flooded this country since last year. I'm sure all of you recall how throughout the entirety of last year we were exposed to wave upon wave of supposed unaccompanied minor illegal aliens. Now, you notice that I am not buying into the political correct claim of either illegal immigration, because as Jeremy and I have explained on previous episodes of the Wright Flyer, immigration is the legal process by which one becomes naturalized to another country. It is an arduous process, but it is one to ensure that the traditions and integrity of the country are not subverted by those who have no intention to assimilate within the greater society at large. Unfortunately, with illegal aliens, we don't have that. And just as one cannot legally murder someone or legally rob someone, one cannot illegally enter the country through the legal process. Now, an alien, on the other hand, is merely one who enters the country, irrespective of status. So one can be an illegal or criminal alien. Yet we see that the salivating mainstream media always plays this game of semantics, and I know that we have mentioned these types of semantics going back to our first episode, our premiere pilot episode, if you will, that aired on September 11th of 2015. Well, we do that because it's very important to point out just how devious and maniacal the radical extreme fringes of the left are, particularly when it comes to their lapdog salivating mainstream media. They want to claim that these people are so-called undocumented migrants, or, I love this one, undocumented workers, as if the only reason they are here is to work. That's not true. A lot of them are here to get the free political goodies that have been handed out by the left wing and the detente wing of the gutless opposition party. Once again, this highlights just how great an extent of the betrayal by Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan we have seen with respect to this omnibus bill that he thrust down our throats. He deliberately betrayed us, stabbed us in the back, and twisted the knife in order to cause the maximum amount of pain. And this is something that cannot and should not be tolerated in an open and free society like that of the United States of America. Nevertheless, we are continuing to face this, and we know that Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan is not a friend of the American people. We must, again, realize what the truth is, and then proactively work to get around these obstacles to returning our government to strict adherence to the United States Constitution and to respecting our fundamental and unalienable rights which were endowed to us by our Creator. Again, this is much easier said than done, but I have faith in the great and unconquerable, unstoppable spirit of the American people. Just as every enemy of the United States in years past has underestimated the ironclad will of the American people, I think that these nefarious political actors who are working non-stop to deprive us of our fundamental and unalienable rights, as well as our representative Republican form of government, have also underestimated the ironclad will, spirit, character, and determination of the American people. We are not a weak people. We are not a people to be trifled with. Yet these arrogant fools who have assumed the reins of political power are insulting the American people at every given opportunity. They literally think we are nothing but a collective of fools, idiots, and morons. Well, that is not true. And they will believe this to their detriment, because the American people are not one to give up. We didn't give up when facing the most powerful military force known to man, that being the British Empire, when we delved into that long and bloody struggle for independence. And despite coming close to the edge of oblivion and tipping over into the abyss, thereby allowing tyranny and oppression to reign supreme, we managed to get through. We managed to work through it. We managed to stay determined, and it is that fierce fire of determination that truly defines the true character, spirit, heritage, and above all, national identity of the American citizen. And despite the fact that these political elites have gone out of their way to try and abridge our fundamental and unalienable rights and attempt to bottle up this undeniable characteristic of the American people, to besmirch and belittle it, we will not succumb to their nefarious and deceitful efforts, because, once again, just as every enemy of the United States has underestimated us, they too have underestimated us. Nevertheless, the strain on our system by this wave of illegal aliens is undeniable. and American citizens protested the attempts by the federal government to relocate these supposed unaccompanied minors throughout the country. It proved, yet again, that the political powers that be didn't really want to find a workable solution to the torrent of illegal aliens who claimed to be seeking asylum from violence in Central and South America. You know, the solution is already found in our well-established immigration laws. All we have to do is enforce the laws which are already on the books, but they are now saying that that is impossible to achieve. Why is it impossible to achieve? The only reason that I can think of that anyone would say that it is impossible to achieve is that they merely lack the political will to do so, that they have ulterior motives for doing so. And we know that those ulterior motives are deeply rooted in this fierce opposition that the political elites, the political powers that be, that hold the reins of power up there on Capitol Hill, just don't want the American people to be the independent-minded people that they have always been, that they are somehow diametrically opposed to everything that is great about the United States. This, too, is a tragic reality that we must awaken to. We must stand up to this government that is doing everything to tear us apart and state in a firm and no uncertain terms, no, enough is enough. We will not bow down and capitulate to your incessant and repeated efforts to destroy everything that we hold near and dear about the United States of America, and that includes our representative Republican form of government. Now, I guess Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan just can't see that. You know, he has redoubled down on his effort, and he said that the computers in the United States of America will stop unless we bring more foreign workers in. What a laughable lie, because when you actually stop and look at the tech sector, there is a shortage of jobs. And there are American tech workers who are looking for jobs, and there have been horror stories throughout the year of companies like Disney firing well-trained American tech workers who then basically the company forced them to train their foreign replacements. Is that really the type of message that we want to send out here in the United States of America? Is that really the type of representation that the American people deserve? Absolutely not. It is a disgrace, it is a shame, and Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan ought to be chased out of the country just like his namesake Benedict Arnold. This is why I call Paul Ryan Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan. He is betraying the trust of the American people. He is showing allegiance to non-citizens over the citizens. And yet the legislative branch of government is supposed to be our representatives. After all, is not Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan Speaker of the House of Representatives? Just who is he representing? It's clearly not the American people, because he has assumed a position that is diametrically opposed to their will and to their consent. And this, once again, highlights the fact of why Pat Cadell went out several days ago to Breitbart News and said that about 3/4 of the American population actually believe that the government is ruling without their consent. This means that this is the closest we have ever been to revolution in this country in living memory. Think about that, folks. That is staggering. That is something that just cannot be brushed aside. That is not some light option, not some small thing that we can simply take for granted. It means that there is a massive disconnect between the government and the people, and the government is either oblivious to it or simply doesn't care. And I think it's more of the latter rather than the former. Nevertheless, we know that the political elites are just trying to say that it's impossible to enforce the laws, and they want to claim that these illegal aliens are basically refugees. Pundits from the salivating mainstream media and the detente wing of the gutless opposition party continually wring their hands, claiming we cannot let them be exposed to the harsh and increasing violence brewing across our southern border. Why not? Since when did we become the caretakers of South and Central America? Isn't it time that they do what our founding fathers did and wrest control away from these potent dictators and tyrants? That is what a free people should do. They shouldn't flee here. They should take a stand and ensure that their fundamental and unalienable rights are well protected. That is the position we should take. And we here in the United States should ultimately turn to those governments in Central and South America and say, get your act together, make your people free. We will not tolerate having potentates, despots, dictators, and tyrants so close to our borders. Because if we take some of the arguments that have been leveled against the United States, saying that we are depriving these people, why would we want to deprive these native countries of their own natural-born talent? Why would we want to deprive them of their citizens? We should encourage their citizens to embrace the light of liberty as we have and to bring that forth in their home countries. Of course, will you hear this from the detente wing of the gutless opposition party or those radical utopian socialists that infest the Democrat Party? No, of course not, because it goes against their twisted and radical left-wing ideology. It means that they cannot fundamentally transform the United States as Obama vowed to do back during the campaign trail in 2008. This is all of the utmost importance, and it shows the massive disconnect that exists in this country. And yet we see that these supposed political leaders, those who supposedly represent the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this country, we the people, don't care. They are just absolutely obstinate in their refusal to do the right thing, to actually represent the American people. So the entire tripe thrust upon us by these talking heads was enough to churn the stomach. They attempted to guilt-trip the American people into feeling sorry for these souls who have no intention of assimilating into our culture and society. Well, the anger of the American people is at a breaking point, and I believe that the feds are starting to seek a safety valve to relieve some of this pressure, in order to buy themselves a bit more time before the inevitable overboil. Because let's face it, folks, what they are doing right now is unsustainable. They are exposing the American people to greater risk of danger from attacks like those nefarious terrorists, Saeed Farouk and his malicious wife, Tashfeen Malik. We already know that the worst attacks that occurred on French soil since the dark days of World War II were at least carried out in part by terrorists masquerading as so-called Syrian refugees. Yet the President of the United States and his regime are attempting to flood this country with so-called Syrian refugees, at least 10,000 by next year. None of these so-called refugees have been vetted. We have no idea of what their intentions are. We have no idea of whether they are out to cause ill harm or will to the American people or to put our freedom at jeopardy. But is that a risk that we should really take? No. Not in the light of what has been happening, not in the light of these sorts of terrorist attacks, not in the light of everything that has unfurled, both in France and in the United States, as well as in the country where these so-called refugees hail from. It would be one thing if they were the Christian population, which it is demonstrable that they have been attacked, that they have been subject to real oppression. But it's another thing for the Sunni Muslims when you remember that ISIS is made up of Sunni Muslims and that it is very easy for ISIS to infiltrate these Sunni Muslims. Therefore, this is not a risk that any sane person would take. This is not the sort of danger that we should expose America and her people to. Yet, the political powers that be, people like Barack Hussein Obama and Benedict Arnold, Paul Ryan, are doing everything to fund these so-called refugees, to ensure that they get into this country, to ensure the further degradation and destruction of American sovereignty. And that is in complete contradiction to the United States Constitution, which, as per Article 6, Clause 2, is the supreme law of the land. And clearly, that omnibus bill would not be a part of the supreme law of the land because it is not in furtherance or in pursuance of our shared Constitution. Therefore, we cannot just turn a blind eye to what the federal government has been doing. And we cannot deny that what they are doing is, in fact, detrimental to everything that we hold near and dear about the United States. This is the truth. But we have the power to take our country back from these potentates and wannabe dictators, these tyrants, these people who go out of their way to deprive, depress, and destroy us. You know, we just have to force them back into strict adherence to the Constitution. And isn't it amazing that those on the radical extreme fringes of the left attempt to claim that that's radical? They try and say that those of us that want to preserve our country, to preserve the law, to ensure that the law is followed, are somehow radical or extreme, when nothing could be further from the truth. Yet they don't care. It's all about their propagandistic message, which they double down on every opportunity they get. And they are proactively assisted by the salivating mainstream media that's not doing a thing to help the American people. Well, it is high past time that they come to be held accountable for their actions, that they be held accountable for the nefarious deeds that they have unleashed upon the decent, hard-working, red-blooded American citizens. And the way that we do that is that we expose the truth. That is what we are attempting to do here at the Wright Flyer. The truth is the only mission that we have, and providing you with the tools to gain a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and unalienable rights, thereby empowering you, is another massive goal that we have here. It is our ultimate goal here at the Wright Flyer to empower you. And of course, the detente wing of the gutless opposition party and the utopian socialists within the Democrat Party are going to loathe and despise us for it, because it takes away their propagandistic message. We are throwing it back at them with the truth. But don't just take what I am saying here or what Jeremy and I have said on past episodes for face value. Look it up for yourself. I think you will be greatly rewarded in doing so, because you will find the truth and you will be able to make decisions for yourself. And is that not empowering? Is it not refreshing to actually hear that you are capable of caring for yourself, that you are capable of doing things for yourself, that you don't need the heavy hand of government thrusting you or pushing you in a certain direction, that you are capable of making the best decisions for yourself? That, historically speaking, is what is so great about the natural law tenets that underpin our shared United States Constitution. But of course, those that want to concentrate power in the hands of an autocratic group of elites, much like the detente wing of the gutless opposition party and those utopian socialists like Hillary Rotten Clinton, Senator Burn Me Sanders, Martin the Doofus O'Malley, and, of course, Barack Hussein Obama, they don't like that. They don't want you to think for yourself. They want you to just bow down at the altar of statism and allow them to do whatever they want to do. they are completely arrogant and hypocritical in the way that they look at things. And of course, this is disastrous for the country and has no place in a free and open society like that of the United States of America. That is the appalling thing that is here. But back to this interesting little case that's developing with respect to Jay Johnson and the Department of Homeland Security, as well as the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. According to Jerry Marcon and David Nakamura at the Washington Post, the Department of Homeland Security has begun the preparatory stages for a series of raids targeting mere hundreds of families who flocked to this country since the start of last year for immediate deportation. Notice that I place emphasis on mere hundreds. We know for a fact that tens of thousands of illegal aliens flooded this country last year, and the government wants to do a supposed show of good faith by deporting only hundreds. That's hardly a drop in the bucket and won't really accomplish much of anything. You see, this is the type of duplicitous and intellectually disingenuous games that the federal government plays with the American people. It shows that they just loathe and despise us and hold us in utter contempt. They think we are utterly stupid and cannot see through the smoke and mirrors, as well as the wool that they are attempting to pull over our eyes. But the American people are not stupid. I have faith in the independent character, will, and spirit of the American people. We can overcome so much, and we have overcome greater obstacles in our past than we have now. And I know that we can overcome this. Nevertheless, it shows the duplicitous nature of government. I think that this is a ploy as we are entering into a pivotal election year when the people are totally opposed to the establishment and traditional political thinking, that Obama thinks that maybe he can shore up Hillary Rotten Clinton for a victory here, or if not her, one of the other doofuses in the DNC seeking the office of President of the United States, by making it seem as though, hey, after San Bernardino, maybe we are going to start getting serious with our porous southern border. Maybe we're going to get serious about securing the border. But, you know, it's a little too late. You know, that old adage just, it comes into play here because it shows that these radical and extremist left-wingers are just doing this for lip service. They don't mean anything by it. And a vast majority of those who have already flooded this country are simply going to get to stay. Because, you know, this is only for those that have been ruled by a judge to be deported. And that's very few indeed. And what it really goes to show is that they have to save face somehow. And so they're going to make it seem as though they're doing nothing. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, but I am Oz the Great and Powerful. But he really wasn't. He was a hack. And that's what Jay Johnson is, and that's what these so-called deportation of these illegal aliens is too. You know, the nationwide campaign is slated to be carried out by ICE agents possibly as early as next month. What's more, this would be the first large-scale effort to deport families who have flooded this country, claiming that they are fleeing the violence that plagues both South and Central America. I have to take pause here because I think we are seeing a bit of the threadbare theatrics and semantics which have become all too common on the left and spewed via their mouthpiece, the salivating mainstream media. You see, folks, you have to question what the media tells you, because it is proven time and again that they are incapable of divorcing themselves from their radical and twisted, extremist, left-wing agenda. And as such, we are seeing that the truth is being lost in the wayside here. It's being shed, and it's amazing that these so-called journalists who have no journalistic integrity whatsoever can sit there with a straight face and try and claim to be objective, to actually claim that they're bringing true information to the American people. Well, they try and obfuscate the truth. They try and spin it to fit their radical and twisted utopian socialist agenda. And that's why it's important to read between the lines, to discover the truth for yourself, to empower yourself with knowledge, to know what steps are necessary to ensure that you have the truth, nothing but the truth, and the whole truth. And that's the problem that we have here. And so, we know that this so-called campaign is set up to try and expunge only a couple hundred of the tens of thousands of these supposed unaccompanied minors or family units, which would be a minor and one parent or a minor and one adult relative, back to the country. Well, all of those that have come here, of those thousands, just a couple hundred that are going back. That's like how Paul Ryan claims that he's going to balance the budget by cutting future spending and not addressing the current spending. It's a phantasm. It's cooking the books. It's a type of duplicitous and hypocritical thing that they engage in the hopes that it will placate the American people, convince the American people that they are doing everything in their power to help us, when in fact they're just kicking the can down the road. Well, we are at a point now, ladies and gentlemen, that we can't just keep kicking the can down the road. We have to stand up and make a choice. Are we going to embrace our sovereignty? Are we going to embrace strict adherence of the fundamental principles contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution? Or are we going to embrace these failed policies of this tyrannical Obama regime that are pushing us towards mediocrity and ultimately to perpetual failure? I think the choice is quite clear. It's open and obvious, folks. We cannot just bow down and capitulate and continue to embrace things as they are, because as I have already stated, what is happening right now is unsustainable. There's no way around that. There's no way to sugarcoat that. It's just the way things are, and we have to accept it. So, to go into this type of duplicity and theatrics that we are seeing on the part of the salivating mainstream media, the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, and the utopian socialists of the Democrat Party, we need to actually define some of these terms, these weasel words that are being thrown around with reckless abandon by these so-called sources. And so, let's look at Merriam-Webster's dictionary. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, asylum is protection from arrest and extradition given especially to political refugees by a nation or by an embassy or other agency enjoying diplomatic immunity. Next, we turn to the definition of refugee. A refugee is a person who flees to a foreign country or power to escape danger or persecution. Now, in the legal sense, a refugee or refugee status entails more than this. And it's important to make that distinction, because I think that what the media does is they kind of play this semantics and go with a general definition when in fact we're talking about a legal term. And that's the type of term of art or weasel words that we see. And that's why these games of semantics can be so dangerous, especially when it comes to obfuscating the truth. It's a way to push forward their radical, twisted left-wing agenda without having to expose the facts. And then they can claim that they weren't lying, that they were actually telling the truth. It's just that they misunderstood. Well, no, they understand fully what it is that they're saying and doing. They understand how their message diametrically opposes everything that the American people want. Because when you stop and think about it, the American people don't want their country to be fundamentally transformed in this manner. I don't care what the salivating mainstream media tries to say. This country does not want to see its future trampled upon by these people who have no desire to assimilate or become part of our culture. You know, one of the biggest money drains on our economy right now is all of these illegal aliens sending money back to their home country. No, it needs to stay here. We need to innovate here. We need to support the interests of the American citizens, as any country in its right mind would do everything to support the best interests of its own sovereign citizens. That goes to common sense. But as Jeremy and I have oft-times reiterated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, it appears that common sense has no place whatsoever in this regime, or indeed in the entirety of the federal government, or indeed most governments. It's as though a prerequisite to government is that it must, by its very nature, be wasteful and inefficient, and above all, diametrically opposed to the will, consent, hopes, and aspirations and dreams of the ultimate wielders of sovereignty, we the people. Government acts as a cancer. It's a tumor. It grows, and it's always at the expense of we the people. And under this regime, it has only gotten exponentially worse. It has just quadrupled in size. It has metastasized in a way that is unthinkable. It is frightening to think of the scope to which this government has grown, and to the extent that it stands in direct opposition to the American people. Is this really the sort of government that we wish to have in the United States? I think, once again, that the answer is quite obvious. No. No sane or rational person would want to expose him or herself to this sort of dysfunctional government. No person would want to just open their doors to strangers without vetting them, and just to allow these people to live in their own homes. But that's the way these utopian socialists and the detente wing of the gutless opposition party always speak with respect to the illegal alien crisis in this country. And they don't even want to call it the crisis for what it is. Yes, they call it a crisis, but they say it's because of things in Central and South America, and that the only way to help them is to bring them here. Again, I must reiterate the point that I made earlier. Why are they not pushing to change the governments south of this border? Why is that not priority number one? Because it doesn't fit their radical and twisted agenda of fundamentally transforming the United States. But you know what? I don't want the United States to be fundamentally transformed, because the natural law tenets that underpin our shared Constitution are timeless. And I have a feeling that a vast majority of the American people don't want to see our country so drastically or fundamentally transformed, because no good can come from change for the sake of change alone. If they want to transform this country, go through the legal process as outlined in Article 5 of our shared United States Constitution. Oh yes, I'm sure I'll hear once again that that's too arduous, it's too restrictive, it doesn't allow us to help enough people. Well, have you ever stopped and think that maybe it's up to these people to start helping themselves, to be proactive, self-responsible, and self-accountable citizens? After all, is that not the bedrock of what it means to be free? I don't want to be taken care of from cradle to grave. I want to be able to make decisions for myself, because only I really understand the best way to achieve my goals, hopes, and aspirations. Nobody else dreamed up my goals for me. I came up with these goals, and I don't care that Obama stood up in front of the cameras of the salivating mainstream media during the 2012 campaign and attempted to say that if you had a small business, you didn't build it. No, Mr. Obama, quit being a duplicitous liar. We, the people, the ultimate wielders of sovereignty and power here in the United States of America, are tired of your relentless efforts to dismantle our country, to tear down all that is near, dear, and great about this country. We are sick of it. Yet, you just continue to redouble your efforts, and the detente wing of the gutless opposition party marches in lockstep with you. People like El Jefe Jeb A. Bush, who came out and claimed that illegal
aliens, when crossing that border illegally, are engaging in an act of love. Really? Does that mean when someone burglarizes your home that they're engaging in an act of love too? Because that's a similar logic as to what was espoused by El Jefe. But you know what? I can't even call that logic. It's dislogic. It's intellectually disingenuous to the core. El Jefe, you should follow the example of your other friend and champion of amnesty, Lindsey Grahamnesty, and drop out of the race. You have no traction, you have no competent leadership skills, and you have proven yourself incapable and unqualified to hold the reins of political power here in the United States. You would be hardly different than Hillary Rotten Clinton, and the American people are onto you. We do not want another disastrous Bush regime. 2 is quite bad enough. You should go run along home now and leave the running of this country to the adults, because the adults are sick and tired of your childish antics and your attempts to tear apart everything that is great about this country. It is time that America starts being proud to be America again. It is time that Americans realize that there is something truly exceptional about our representative Republican system of government. Our Constitution and our Founding Fathers represent the greatest pinnacle of providence and mankind working together to create a truly inspirational thing. I know that Jeremy and I have both stated in past episodes of the Wright Flyer that humanity or mankind cannot achieve perfection. But you know what? The United States Constitution, as a social compact or contract, is the closest thing to perfection that has ever been devised by the hands of man. And that is because it is inspired by natural law, and natural law is devised by providence. So, of course, the atheistic sorts, or those that embrace the amoral, basically, stance of the current political powers that be, the utopian socialists, or the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, they don't want to believe that. They want this secularized society. They want this society that is redefined, where illegal aliens are lovers of this country, even though they're breaking our laws, even though they're refusing to assimilate, even though they're refusing to learn and speak our language. Well, enough is enough. We can see through the mindless political kabuki theater that you are trying to pull out there. We are not hypnotized by your lame attempts to pull the wool over our eyes. We are on to you, and we are sick and tired of it. We want America to flourish and be great again, and the only way to do that is to embrace the true characteristics of the United States. And by flooding us with foreign aliens who have come here illegally, by rewarding them for their felonious behavior, you are devaluing everything that is great about this country. You are insulting those who patiently waited and went through the legal process. Stop insulting those who went through the arduous process to become American citizens. Stop insulting those of us that are natural-born American citizens. That is truly tantamount to the most wicked and insulting thing that any government can do. And it once again, it just absolutely proves why so many Americans have actually come out and stated in no uncertain terms and in unequivocal terms that the government is ruling without their consent. This is a dark day for the United States, but remember, it is always darkest before the dawn. We cannot give up hope or faith in this great constitutional system of ours. And especially on this, the night of Christmas Eve, and on Christmas Day, it is a time to sit back and reflect of the type of hope that came to us from Providence. Think about that, folks. think about how blessed it is that on the day that is traditionally celebrated, whether it is actually the day of Christ's birth or not, it is the day that's traditionally associated with that, liberty was secured at the Battle of Trenton. That was Providence, shining its great light of freedom and hope here on the United States of America. And I do not believe that Providence has abandoned the United States of America. And neither should we. We should maintain the hope and faith that we have in this great nation. We should continue to strive to be the exceptional nation that we are. American exceptionalism is not just something that we should throw to the wayside. So, let's get back to the legal sense of what a refugee is. So we know that in the legal sense, a refugee is an individual who leaves their native country for primarily political or religious reasons. They may also be forced to leave as a result of a disaster, things such as war, famine, or political upheaval. Traditionally speaking, this has been a very difficult status to achieve. But over the past several decades, the federal government has been working feverishly to change this status, thereby making it easier to gain permanent access to this country. You know, that speaks to the plan that Ted Kennedy worked on over 30 years ago that was exposing this country to this sort of plight. And it's tragic when you stop and think about just the insurmountable, near irreparable, but I don't think it's irreparable, harm that this has caused to the country. The so-called refugees fleeing from South America and Central America are not facing the same degree of threat that traditionally qualified for refugee status. Indeed, many of those who flood across the border in illegal fashion seem to be armed with particular and specific knowledge as what key words or phrases to say in order to ensure that they will be placed in an overtaxed immigration court system here in the United States. It's disturbing to see that there is an orchestrated, well-orchestrated, might I add, effort to subvert the well-established immigration laws of the United States. What's worse is that our so-called allies in Central and South America, such as Mexico, are proactively facilitating this flood of illegal aliens into the United States, all under the false pretense of helping these supposed refugees. Consequently, we are seeing an undeniable abuse of our system, and this is exposing American citizens to greater danger. Islamo-fascist terrorist organizations such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda are exploiting this loophole to their advantage. And how can we deny that after we've seen that they exploited the K-visa immigration system with Tashfeen Malik to get her here, when it was clearly evident that she had produced a false address that any cursory Google search would have brought up to the attention of the governmental officials. But you see, once again, this cancerous and poisonous doctrine of political correctness was utilized as a weapon against the American people. It was used to once again push forward this horrific, radical, twisted left-wing ideology of the Obama regime. And once again, this was done to the great detriment of the American people. We cannot simply allow this sort of behavior to continue because it is killing American citizens. And once again, I have to remind you all that before the San Bernardino attack happened, the neighbor of the Farouks saw all of this suspicious activity, but was afraid to report it to the authorities because she was afraid of the politically correct Nazi-like Gestapo of this Obama regime from labeling her an Islamophobe. You see, folks, people are more afraid of their government than the Islamofascists, because the government has become so diametrically opposed to the consent, will, hopes, and aspirations of the American people. That is the sick and twisted reality that we face each and every day in America under the Obama regime. It is an undeniable nightmare that we are facing in this country, and it is sickening to see that the free world is succumbing to this sort of tyranny and despotism. How long will it take before we say enough is enough? That is an important question. We must take our country back, because these potentates, irrespective of whether they are the utopian socialists in the Democrat Party or the détente wing of the gutless opposition party, are doing everything in their power to keep us down. They're doing everything in their power to lessen our quality of life, to make our standard of living much less than what we have come to know and expect from our hard and diligent efforts. These are the people that always bow down to these redistributive programs that have no place in an open and free society. And let me remind you yet again what the worst redistributive program ever devised by the hands of man ever was. It was the Holocaust under the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Folks, the Nazis were in no way, shape, form right-wingers. They were socialists, just like Bernie Sanders is a socialist. Bernie Sanders is the American equivalent of a Nazi. If that bothers you, I'm sorry. Actually, no, I'm not, because I'm just telling the truth. And if you can't accept the truth, that's your problem, not mine. We here at the Wright Flyer are dedicated to the truth, and you can look it up for yourself. But, you know, it's not just the threat from the Islamofascists that means so much about this, or that poses such a significant and undeniable threat with respect to this issue. We shouldn't forget that refugees have been a cause of problems in the past. You know, it was anarchist refugees that were behind the Wall Street bombing of 1920 and the first Red Scare, and some of the worst terrorist attacks that we experienced until the just horrific attacks of September 11th, 2001. But yes, the Islamofascists are certainly a deep part of this. We shouldn't forget that the dastardly terrorist attacks carried out in Paris back in November, which were the worst attacks on French soil since World War II, were also partially carried out by Islamofascists masquerading as so-called Syrian refugees. Why we in the West are so determined to commit political and societal suicide is beyond me. And I know that I've said this before, but it's absolutely baffling as to why the cradle of civilization is going to sit here and destroy everything that we've built. Why is it that any other civilization can take pride in what they do, but we in the West must just deny all of the great achievements of antiquity and of recent history? It's disturbing. It's absolutely disturbing. It's bigoted. And yet they point the fingers at us, and they call us the bigots. That is the real duplicity that we see here. That is the real intellectually disingenuous arguments that are thrust and fronted by these utopian socialists. And it's all just to forward their agenda. It's as I've said on previous episodes of the Wright Flyer, that wherever you see socialism attempting to stick its claws or to tear its claws into the body politic of a nation, it is doing everything in its power to tear down what came before, because it is always so diametrically opposed to what came before. Socialism cannot build. It is destructive. It is parasitic in its nature. And that's why I say the government under a socialistic regime like that of the Barack Hussein Obama regime is cancerous and destructive because there is absolutely nothing about it whatsoever that is creative. There is nothing about it that is inspirational other than it inspires fear, angst, and anger. You know, like the fear that the Farouk's neighbors felt of being labeled an Islamophobe. Why is it that people are so afraid of the government? Because the government has been acting in such a tyrannical and heavy-handed fashion that it has created this atmosphere of fear. And that's exactly what you saw in the National Socialist era in Nazi Germany. It's what you saw with another quasi-socialist with Benito Mussolini. You know, it's funny, Benito Mussolini was actually named after Benito Juarez, who was a radical left-wing president in Mexico who ruled in Mexico at the time of America's Civil War. And it shows that Benito Mussolini's past had always been very closely linked to socialism. He used to be the editor-in-chief of the Italian socialist newspaper called Avanti or Forward. Isn't that amazing? That the same campaign slogan put out by the Obama regime, it's the same name, the Benito Mussolini socialist paper, and has some of the same ideology espoused in the propaganda and the cult of personality, like we saw with tin-pot dictators like Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler and Pol Pot and Ho Chi Minh and Vladimir Ilyich Lenin and Joseph Stalin. You see, there's an undeniable pattern there, and this would explain why they are going out of their way to absolutely fundamentally transform the United States of America. That is their radical and twisted agenda. It is to tear apart everything that is great about this country and replace it with failed policies. You know, if you ever look at socialism anywhere throughout the world, has it ever worked? And the answer is always an unequivocal no. It does not work. It is theft by any other name. And that is a system that is born of immorality. It oozes with immorality, and it just quashes human ingenuity, the human spirit, everything that makes mankind great. That is the nefarious and twisted nature of these utopian socialists that are hell-bent on destroying the United States of America and her ultimate wielders of sovereignty, we the people. So, we see that the West is determined to commit this political suicide. And what's even more nefarious about it is there's a guilt that has been fomented by the utopian socialists that has somehow infected vast swaths of the Western world. We must awaken from this slumber of deceit, lest we fade from the face of the earth. Literally, folks, we are talking about a cultural conflict, a clash of cultures, that if we do not persevere, the very nation as we know it will disappear. And they have already accomplished so much. But once again, if we retain the hope that our founding fathers had, in those dark moments during the American War of Independence where victory was no certainty, then I think that we can overcome these dark and nefarious forces that are trampling upon the great aspects of our republic. That we can persevere, as we always have. We must maintain that faith, and we must envision a country that once again strictly adheres to the natural law tenets that underpin our shared United States Constitution and to the supreme law of the land, which is as per Article 6, Clause 2, the United States Constitution and any law that is made in pursuance or furtherance thereof. But that would certainly not be things like the Omnibus Bill, and that would certainly not be things like flooding this country with illegal aliens. Contrary to what El Jefe Jeb Bush says, it is not an act of love. It is an undeniable criminal act designed to destabilize this country. And it is people like El Jefe Jeb Bush that are pushing this ultimate destruction of the United States. It is why he should not be let anywhere near the White House. And for that matter, neither should Marxist Rubio. Remember, he was the author of the Gang of Eight bill. He was the one that tried to convince the American people that it was a good thing to push for amnesty, that it was a good thing to just leave our borders porous and wide open. And then he's been so deceitful about what Ted Cruz's stance has been, because he knows he's losing on this. He knows that he has betrayed the true base of the party and that they will never trust him. Marxist dubious Rubio, do us all a favor and join your friend Lindsey Grahamnesty outside of the race. Let the adults have the power, because we are the only ones that are capable of bringing this country back. And that's the thing, folks. We cannot look to an elected leader as a savior. The only ones that are going to be able to save us in this country, as Jeremy and I have stated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, is we ourselves. We, the people, are the only ones that possess the capability to bring this country back from the brink of ruination and destruction. And I know that that's no soft option, that that's no easy task, but it is something that we must do if we are to preserve this country and to return all levels of government back to strict adherence to our shared United States Constitution. You know, I'm sure there are some on the left who attempt to point to me, point the finger at me, and contend that I'm fear-mongering. But that's simply not true. We should be concerned. The terrorist attacks that unfurled at San Bernardino should be a warning sign for us all. Our avowed enemies are more determined than ever to destroy us, along with everything that we hold near and dear. Yet this doesn't seem to matter to the political elite at all. Much like the aristocracy of France in the days leading up to the French Revolution, they are politically tone-deaf and have secluded themselves from the American population. Consequently, they have no real clue as to the pulse of America. It baffles them how candidates who take a hardline stance on the illegal alien issue have skyrocketed in the polls. Well, the answer is really simple. Americans are tired of seeing their culture and society come under an incessant and repeated attack. Now, if there's one thing we can say for certain about the political elites in the United States, it's that they are power-hungry, and they don't want to lose their vice-like grip on the reins of political power. And seeing as how we are entering an election year, they need to at least play lip service to tightening down on the out-of-control influx of illegal aliens. So Jed Johnson, with the Department of Homeland Security, pretends that he is actually going to do something to stem the tide of invasion. Yet, that's all it is. It's political kabuki theater at its worst. The old adage, once again, of too little too late comes to mind again. They should have been acting upon this much sooner, instead of allowing the crisis to fester as it has. And on top of this, the president is redoubling his efforts to flood the country with so-called Syrian refugees. Amidst this web of deceit and destruction, one has to wonder, what happened to the interests of the American citizen? You know, the wielders of sovereignty in the country, the one who these supposed officials are supposed to serve and represent. It's simple, folks. We're being offered as a sacrifice on the altar of fundamental transformation. Once again, those wretched words that Obama uttered on the campaign trail back in 2008 come to mind. You know, this is the fundamental transformation that he spoke of. Again, I cannot emphasize enough just how ghastly that statement was and is. It reflects an overt hostility towards everything that bolsters the American identity and ensures that we are great as a nation and people. Very few people within the marbled halls of government represent the American citizenry. And they have declared war on us. And this sentiment is growing among the population at fever pitch. It absolutely is. If the pressure is not relieved, political upheaval will become a very real thing within the borders of the United States. Never before has it seemed that the political powers that be have dedicated their every waking moment to the further oppression and detriment of the people. That's a tragic thing to say about the last best hope for freedom and liberty left in this world. As Jeremy and I have said on previous episodes of the Wright Flyer, it seems that nothing is held sacred anymore by the political class. They have become the very sort of entity that our founding fathers fought so hard to gain independence from. It's as though they are attempting to roll back the hands of time. Such a position would be disastrous for America and her people, yet these scumbags just don't seem to give a damn. And they literally don't. And you want to know what's funny about all this so-called clamping down on illegal aliens? Irrespective of the fact that it won't even make a dent in the number of illegal aliens who have already infiltrated our borders, the most maniacal of the savage left, people like Vermont Senator Nerdface Burn Me Sanders and former Governor Martin the Doofus O'Malley, dashed before the cameras of the salivating mainstream media to lament and decry the inhumane treatment of these supposed refugees. They plunge themselves into the disgustingly predictable and politically correct line that America isn't compassionate. But that raises a significant question which the mainstream media simply refuses to ask. What is compassionate about exposing the American people to increased risk of terrorist attacks? What's compassionate about allowing hardened criminals to flood across our porous southern border? The answer is absolutely nothing about it is compassionate. Again, this is an example of the sort of politically correct drivel that is tearing this country apart at the seams. It must stop. Yet people like Nerdface Sanders are doubling down on their efforts to destroy this country. What good is a country that refuses to acknowledge its borders and immigration laws? Such a nation has ceded its national status and becomes a mere shadow of its former self. Is this really the best path to be taken by the United States and her people? I believe that the answer is open and obvious. Only the purposefully obtuse would miss the fact that this is not in the best interest of the American people. At a time when the economy is in the trash, and everything is decaying and crumbling around us, the last thing we need is an influx of criminal aliens. We have immigration laws for a reason. They are designed to keep the United States safe and to ensure that subversive elements are not allowed to infiltrate into the country, thereby exposing the people to greater risk of attack and harm. Despite the gravity of the situation, Sanders and Martin O'Malley attacked the planned deportation, irrespective of the fact that it won't do a blessed thing to stem the tide of illegal aliens infesting this country. Sanders claims he is disappointed by the plan. Well, good for him. I'm disappointed too. But for the reason that it isn't doing enough to shield the American people from exposure to greater danger. Sanders, on the other hand, is disappointed in the plan because it attempts to send back those who proactively violated the well-established law of the United States. Sanders made some stupid, emotionally charged argument claiming that parents would go to great lengths to save their children from danger. Really? A responsible parent would send their children unaccompanied through dangerous lands to get to the United States? This isn't a fairy tale. What that is irresponsible parenting personified. And Burn Me Sanders is proactively encouraging this sort of illegality and reckless behavior. I would say that he should be ashamed of himself, but that would presuppose that Sanders has a soul. And we know that he doesn't. Like every other tin-pot dictator or wannabe dictator in history, he couched his desire to encourage illegality in a tired claim of save the children. Sanders actually said, "We need to take steps to protect children and families seeking refuge here, not cast them out." Okay, nerd-faced Burn Me Sanders, let's start by sending them all to your house. You talk about the 1% always abusing their wealth and power. You support a massive redistributive program. Let's start by redistributing your home and offices to these alleged refugees. Why don't you lead by example? Of course, he would never do such a thing. It's beyond him. His so-called support of the little guy is nothing but a farce, and I believe that the American people can see right through it. At the same time, Martin the Doofus O'Malley says that the entire world is looking at us. Yes, they are. But they're not merely looking at us, you dolt. They're laughing at us. No other nation has so totally disregarded their borders as the United States of America has. Yes, we're seeing a similar thing happen in Europe with respect to the so-called Syrian refugees. And what do you know? It is having a similar deleterious impact upon their citizens. Is it any wonder, then, that according to Pat Caddell, that 3/4 of the American people believe that the government is ruling without their consent? Folks, that is an alarming number, and it speaks volumes about the discontent that exists between, and not just discontent, but disconnect that exists between the establishment of both political parties and the American people. Indeed, the American citizen is yearning for real leadership, and there is little in the way of such leadership on the corner, or around the corner. Once again, folks, this is the reason why Jeremy and I have come out and endorsed Texas Senator Ted Cruz for the office of President of the United States. Despite the relentless attempts by the salivating mainstream media to paint a caricature of Cruz as some frothing-at-the-mouth Neanderthal, the American people are beginning to see him for the principled leader that he really is. This is the sort of leadership which is necessary to set America back on the path to strict adherence to the fundamental principles contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. The path to saving this country is by no means an easy one. It is easy to see, but it takes political courage to take the sort of unwavering stance that Mr. Cruz has taken time and again. He proves via his resolute stance that he actually cares about the American people. And as Jeremy and I have oft-times repeated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, pursuant to the natural law tenets that underpin our entire representative republic, we, the people, are the ultimate wielders of sovereignty. So while the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, people like El Jefe Jeb Bush and Marxist Rubio and John Kasich, and the hacks on the left like Hillary Rotten Clinton, Burn Me Sanders, and Martin the Doofus O'Malley, make these tired, emotional arguments in favor of flooding this country with illegal aliens, Cruz takes the rational and principled stance of enforcing our laws. After all, How can we be a nation of laws if we choose to selectively enforce our laws? Our founding fathers understood the vast importance of our shared Constitution. That's why Article 6, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution clearly states that the United States Constitution itself, in conjunction with laws made in pursuance thereof, composes the supreme law of the land. It really is that simple, yet these supposed political leaders willfully turn a blind eye to that and act in an obtuse manner in order to push their twisted and radical utopian socialist agenda. But it gets worse, folks. Martin the Doofus O'Malley headed to Twitter and claimed that a Christmas refugee roundup sounds like something Donald Trump would concoct. He then tried to make an erroneous comparison to Jesus being a refugee as a child. To be honest, I don't think that either the so-called Syrian refugees or the illegal aliens from Central and South America are facing anywhere near the plight that the Hebrews faced at the time of Jesus' birth. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar had ordered the death of each firstborn male child because he feared that this savior would usurp his political authority. If anything, O'Malley is acting more like the wicked king of the Gospels than the Prince of Peace. It's this sort of tired, emotional argument that should churn the stomachs of every decent, red-blooded American citizen. It is quite clear that those on the left and within the detente wing of the gutless opposition party are diametrically opposed to the best interests of the American citizen. Otherwise, they wouldn't be proactively supporting measures that would significantly increase the risk faced by the American people. Folks, we cannot deny that this is an overt effort to attack everything that is great about the United States. It is time for this sort of nonsense to come to an immediate and swift end. What's even more laughable about what O'Malley is saying here is that it is in response to a token gesture being made by his own party's regime. Seriously, the left will do whatever they can to lay the blame of any and everything at the feet of the right. However, in this case, just as in every case, they are on the wrong side of history. They are the ones who are proactively standing against the express will and desire of the American people. Folks, that is a recipe for disaster. It should come back to haunt these wannabe potentates. There is no denying the fact that they are open about their hatred for the American people. Enough is enough. We need to return to sanity in this country, and continuing to open the floodgates to illegal aliens is not the way to achieve this. We, the people, must become more proactive in the defense of our country. We must let these potentates know that we will not tolerate their despotic edicts for even an iota. We're tired of seeing our country and standard of living come under this relentless assault by the nefarious forces of the left and the detente wing of the gutless opposition party. To highlight just how out of touch the radical and extreme fringes of the left really is, Wright has put out a piece that exposes a poll which finds that 44% of Democrats would welcome refugees from the mythical country of Agrabah. As a reminder, Agrabah is the home of Disney's Aladdin. Folks, this is insanity. These people wouldn't know reality if it came and bit them on their posterior. It shows that they are not capable of ruling the country, and it's a frightening fact that these people are actually allowed to vote. But it should also give you courage because it shows that they don't have the intelligence to really orchestrate any logical argument to dispute the natural law tenets of our shared Constitution, and that as long as we have faith in the unyielding character, heritage, and spirit of the United States of America, we will be able to overcome these dark times just as we have overcome every other form of adversity that has been put in our path in the past. And with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of eggnog and alcohol Merry Christmas, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain, Randy Wright, thanking you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer, inviting you to join us the next time that we fly over the friendly airwaves in comfort and style. Hope to see you next time. Feel free to leave comments, cookies, or milk under the tree or on our Facebook, YouTube, or Google Plus page. Once again, thank you for flying the Wright Flyer. Merry Christmas. Take care.